to open the discussion. I would like to look at the discussions which are there now around the larger Moscow or greater Moscow topic. I would like to ask Andrey Sharonov to share his vision of development of the Moscow agglomeration and to give insights on the vision of new areas of growth for bringing in investments to the greater Moscow, and also on his vision of joint efforts by private and public investment sources. Thank you very much. Once again, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I introduce the economic and financial blocks, not the city developmental block. So I will try to reflect on the topic specifically from this point of view. As far as the Moscow agglomeration is related, a number of other panelists are much closer to city development and architectural concepts, and they will reflect on that point of view. First and foremost, let me remind us that the idea of having Moscow in the form of Greater Moscow, which is not the same as Moscow agglomeration, has acquired a more definitive nature last year than this year. This decision has come into force in effect, and the Moscow has increased its territory by the factor of 2.5, and now the territory of the megalopolis is several thousand square kilometers. It is very important to understand that the competition, that the bid procedure that the city held was related to the agglomeration, which is the economic formation, not the administrative unit. This is the notional form which integrates the key daily economic, and note, daily economic activities of the greater agglomeration composed of Moscow and adjacent municipalities, which have a common labor market, common transportation system, in many degrees, life supporting systems and utilities infrastructure, and there is commuting trend, which is there on a daily basis too. The underlying idea of both enlarging the territory of Moscow City and closer attention to the Moscow agglomeration was that as to put in place, not just find and identify, but to put in place new areas and centers of developments, bringing in investments, both public and private, in order to progress with the investment process in Moscow and the Moscow agglomeration. If you are perhaps aware of the history of such development, Moscow used to build a lot of housing and office and commercial spaces, and the dream of investors was to build something in a historical center of Moscow. It was just dictated by a very high value of thus created assets. And I can assure you that Moscow was quite successful in doing that. In recent 20 years, in the historic center of Moscow, in the central district, they have built more than in the preceding 87 years of Soviet reign. And this, to my mind, has gathered a scary momentum and a very large scale with respect to norms and rules of urban architecture and living standards. And the new team and the new mayor have in many ways suspended this kind of activity. You might know that upon the decision of the mayor and the Moscow government, contracts were terminated, totaling some 9 million square meters of various kinds of real estate. Behind the contracts were specific investors' interests and expectations. In order to identify or to put to work these interests on the part of investors to provide an adequate replacement of that, they have come up the idea of enlarging the Moscow's territory and rethinking the concept of Moscow agglomeration. This also includes the idea of relocating some of the federal authorities outside the Moscow's perimeter. This is also about creating the new center, which could attract activities and investments, will generate demand for quite high standards of living, services, and transportation needs. So all that is about the idea, the Moscow agglomeration. So the idea of creation of new center of investments attraction, business activities, and coming up with a polycentric model of the city of Moscow. Regarding sources to achieve that, this is tremendously expensive, of course, and you might think it's a joke, but we are serious when we say that the historic territory of Moscow was being developed for 870 years, and the new territory, which is 1.5 times larger, cannot go an overly fast development. So insofar, the projects under discussion are not very large in terms of its scale and are quite close to the historic territory. The investments in the infrastructure, transportation, and engineering infrastructure will be primarily covered by state funds, both at the federal level and at the level of the entity of the Russian Federation, which is Moscow City and Moscow region. The roads which cross the new territory, even before enlarging Moscow, were viewed as priorities because they are continuations of very important highways within Moscow. The same goes for other motorways in the territory of the Moscow region, which continue the routes from the federal Moscow highways and are part of the infrastructure of the Moscow agglomeration. There is even a special institute in place, which is the Council on the Moscow Transportation Hub, which covers all the Moscow agglomeration with the federal government, represented by the Minister of Transportation in Moscow and Moscow region, which look at the transportation component of the greater Moscow agglomeration. So having put in place this new center of developments through the government cluster and investing heavily in infrastructure, we also are hoping to bring in private investments, which will be put to work in terms of office space, in terms of services and housing, because we do expect that this kind of mixed utilization of new pockets of growth will be quite typical and in line with modern requirements. We can expect that, really. So we see opportunities to attract private investment. So we hope that private investors will come to cooperate.